When you have decided to use a landing page provider like AdFury, one of the issues that people find a little bit intimidating is pointing your ads to the new landing page server, because it involves a little bit of configuration. So we want to sort of demystify that and explain how that works. And to do that, let's imagine that we're doing a search for I don't know, education degree online, and we're running a campaign against that keyword for good old Faber University. So here we have the ad. And the ad has a URL associated with it, this URL, faber.edu. And when people click on that ad, this URL tells the browser to go to the Faber web server. And what happens at the Faber web server is that it has a little table inside of it. And it looks up on that table. It says, hey, where is www.faber.edu? Because there's lots of different pages inside of a web server. It needs to know where various pages are stored. And the web server has a table that has locations. It says, oh, here's the home page right here. Going to deliver that to you. All good so far. Now, when you change landing page providers, and if you want to use AdFury's landing pages, as well as really any landing page provider, you need to point your ads towards the landing page provider's web server, in this case, AdFury's web server. So the issue with that is that this URL is still pointed towards the Faber University web server. You need to point it to the AdFury web server for it to work. And one terrible option is to just change the URL, something like this. Now, clkd.it happens to be AdFury's URL. It's the URL that where the landing pages are hosted. And of course, you wouldn't change your URL to that, because it's inconsistent with the branding. It's not faber.edu's. It's a very confusing experience for the people looking at your ad. So what you want to do is keep the faber.edu URL and still point to AdFury's web server. So how do you do that? Well, the answer is that you use something called subdomains. And a subdomain is changing a little bit of the URL that tells your web server to point somewhere else. The way it works is this. I want you to take a look at the URL and see how we're changing the www to something else. In this case, just for an example, we're changing it to LP, which stands for landing page, but you can change it to anything that you wish. And so what happens now is that when somebody clicks on that URL, it goes to the Faber web server, because you're still pointing to the faber.edu web server. And then the Faber web server is going to look up in its table. It's going to say, hey, where is lp.faber.edu? And what we're going to do is update the table so it says, oh, well, that web server is over here at the AdFury web server. And Faber's web server sends that request along to AdFury, which sends out the landing page. So how do you set this up? Well, so what happens is you need to update that table, and there's kind of a fancy way that you request this. If you want to reach out to your IT person or your hosting provider, what you're really asking for is, hey, add a CNAME for lp.faber.edu with the value clkd.it, which sounds like a lot of gibberish. So let's parse this out and see if we can't make some sense of it. The CNAME is just a fancy word for the type of table entry in the web server that we're making. Remember, when a request comes into the web server, it does a little lookup in the table. CNAME is a type of table entry. So when you say add a CNAME, you're really saying, I want to add an entry into this table. Okay? And lp.faber.edu, LP is the subdomain. And just perhaps is obvious, but just to be ultra clear, the faber.edu is a fictional website. You want to use your actual URL there. So you're entering LP as the subdomain into this table, a CNAME type of entry, and the value is clkd.it. So that's AdFury's landing page server. And just to show you what happens behind the scene, if you ask somebody to do this, or if you want to do it yourself, is the web server has a little form that you fill out. It's literally go to a browser and you click on it, just like any other online form. And you would enter the LP into one field in the form, and you would choose CNAME from a little drop down, and you would enter the value of AdFury's web server right here, and then you'd click Add Record Now. Every single web provider has a similar type of form. And if you want, you can go to AdFury's support site. We have more than a dozen different very common hosting providers with step-by-step instructions and images and arrows pointing out how to update the subdomain in your particular hosting provider. One last thing, just to make sure that it's clear, is that you don't have to use LP. You can use anything you want. So for example, if you want to add a CNAME and you want to use the subdomain visit, so you'd say, hey, I'm going to add a CNAME for visit.faber.edu, and visit is the subdomain, and having done that, then your ad would look something like this.